Hey all, Steve from GuitarNiche here. On the bench we have a lovely 2019 Gibson Les Paul Standard 60s, a nice T burst, and it's in for a refret. Why? Because the owner wants bigger frets. Fine, we're going to give him bigger frets. So, the first thing I did was pulled a fret to do some measurements and get a sense of what's going to be compatible with what I have to work with here as far as the slot dimension. That's an important thing. I'll link to a previous video about that. And likewise, I pulled the nut already and then reinstalled it just to hold the strings and keep the instrument under compression. Now there's a video for pulling that nut, which I'll also link to. So this is going to be like a series of escapades in getting the instrument where the customer wants it. So the next part of the plan is to again relax the strings and deal with this mess down here, this lovely mess down here. Now, you may ask yourself, well, why don't I just take the strings off? Well, I can, but I'm going to need to put strings back on regardless, and I would prefer to use strings that are not brand new, fresh, and stretched and you know, destroy the crap out of them. These will work just dandy for making preliminary assessments and stuff like that. All I have to do is get them out of the way. As long as they're wrapped around the tuners, it's all good. I can relax them, take the tailpiece off and all that. I'll show you what's going to go on down here. The plan is to also take the pickups, take the rings off, invert the pickups, put them back into the routes, mask everything off, and prep the body, keep it from getting any kind of damage and stuff like that, as well as the headstock. And then pull the frets, and we'll see how that goes. And we're going to deal with these strings. So the strings are still attached to the tailpiece, and I'm just going to let that hang over the edge of my workbench. I could coil it up, if you have a back wall or something like that, you're doing this sort of thing. That's probably the way you want to do it. But again, part of the beauty of this is that I'm not taking them off the guitar. And look, this is how you remove a Les Paul nut. See that? Came right out. Easy peasy. It's really that simple, not. Now the fun part, ripping these bad boys out. I'm not going to mince words. I have my own way of doing things. I don't use a soldering iron. It's about making the process as quick and efficient as possible. This type of fretboard, if it does start chipping, I can deal with that, very easily. Anyway, how does it work? This is my favorite tool, one of my favorite tools. It's a dull box cutter. Okay, and all I'm going to do is just score along the sides of the fret, right into the knees, tight to the knees. I call them knees. And what that does is it breaks the surface tension. And it doesn't really matter which side I go from. See, I love doing these things. Look at that. I mean, if this, to be honest, to be fair, let's say, if this was a PRS or other product, you could have all kinds of interesting things going on. Plus, refrets, all that. Anyway, I could go on and on and on and on and on about that. This is a relatively new instrument, so I'm doing it this way because I know this is the best way to do it. the most efficient way to do it. Now that was a light cut, so I'm going to go over that one again. All right. And I mentioned this in one of the previous videos about this guitar. I'm not worried about the nibs because the nibs are going away. The owner knows that. It's part of the cost control because reproducing the nibs is a pain in the rhymes with bass. Okay. Sometimes I go over a score twice because it doesn't, I don't feel like I'm getting in there enough, okay? Now, maybe what I'll do is I'm going to resituate the camera and give you a bird's eye of what's going on here. I'm pretty sure you got the idea. Alrighty, fret number 5 right here, okay? So I will score on that side, light pressure. You can tell if it's cutting wood. You can. If it's really hard to define, like the tactile nature of how you get feedback from your tools. I know that this is a dull edge, but if I press, I will cut myself, but it has, I learned the hard way that if this is razor sharp, and this is an important note here, if this is razor sharp, you will be cutting wood instead of breaking fibers. Now I know that sounds kind of, well, isn't that the same thing? No, it's not, because all you're trying to do is release surface tension at the slot face, okay, just under the fret. I don't want to cut the wood. I just want to score it. It's a difference, and I can feel when the blade is crushing, to use a term. It's not it's probably the most accurate term, but it's crushing and not cutting. But the crush factor is very, very minimal. You can see maybe a little bit back here. Well, you'll see when this comes out. So I'm going to get right in the way here for a second. Maybe come at it from the other end just to give you an idea. Sometimes it does depend on which side you go for. Whatever seems to want to give you purchase. There. Now, very carefully. No, I'm never, ever get the fret is prized up a little bit. Yeah, maybe it's stuck on the other end, but you never want to just take it like a lever and pop it out. You're guaranteed to chip it. Okay, and there we go. Okay, so let's try that one more time. You can see, hopefully you got. Let's get some more light on this if we can. Okay, anyway, we're good. We'll do one more here. Oh, that's good. Oh, very, very nice. This is number 6. Well, it's right in the way. Okay. Now this is awkward for me because I would be coming at it from the other side, but I want you to see what's going on. I can still do it. Hopefully you can see what's going on there. Okay, anyway, sorry, I got to get right in your way. Okay, so once again, and we're just going to get rid of these bad boy frets. Now I'm going to resituate the camera to give you another look, just to add another dimension to the process. Fret number 7, crushing. And just gently. These side cutters have a little bit of a concave grind to them so that I can work with the radius of a fretboard. It's not too severe because you're going to just create more problems. Okay, so this is number 11. Yes, it goes to 11. But why not just make 10 louder? This one goes to 11. We are looking at our next step, which is leveling the fretboard. There's a bit of a debate, or let's say a polarized discussion about should you should you refret and do all your work from a fretboard that's fully flat, or should you have it in a slightly relief-oriented fashion? Well, I look at it like this. The guitar is manufactured with a perfectly flat fretboard. And if you're going to refret it or do any work on it that involves reconstituting the playing surface, work at it from that point of view. Make it perfectly flat, do what you need to do, and then once it's under compression, you take out, if there's any issues, you deal with them. Now, I could go into much more detail on that, but Chris at Highline Guitars has a wonderful video on how his experience has affected his work, and he makes some really interesting observations, and it's well worth a look. If you get a chance, please look it up. Anyway, at this point, I had to open up get some access to the acorn for the relief, okay, and we can see that we got a little wiggle. This is how I prefer to do this sort of thing. We got wiggle in the middle, which means that we have too much relief. So I'm going to notice I'm rocking that a little bit back and forth because I'm trying to I want the truss rod to move a little bit. I don't want to just go crank and say you're done. No, I want the truss rod to kind of move a little bit and kind of find a happy median. Okay, that's better. Okay, and and I'm gonna. Here's my approach to this. I start with the center line, then I go for the treble, and I go for the bass. Interesting point. Actually, two interesting points. This is worth the watch if you care for it. If you can put in more relief on the bass side compared to the treble side, so in other words, the treble side would be straighter than the bass side. You have more of a dip, and how that dip is it scooped, or is it in the middle, or is it, you gotta watch all this stuff, right? But if you can manufacture that on a refret, you will wind up in a state of brilliance. With this instrument, we're not going to do that. We're going for full flat. We're going to go full flat. Anyway, so back to my statement here, which is I'm measuring the middle, I'm measuring the treble, I'm measuring the bass. And they seem really, really, really good. Really, 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 really good. But to satisfy my curiosity, I'm going to give that just a couple more pounds or degrees of torque. It's none of this quarter turn, eighth of a turn, whatever. It's whatever feels like it's doing the job. That's experience. That is bang on. No tipping, no wiggling. Done. Okay, so the next step, well, now that I know that is true up, the next step is I'm going to sand the fretboard because these bad boy nibs got to come off. While I'm at it, I'll get back to my second point that I forgot about. When I was adjusting that, here, I'll do this, okay? Get back to this for a second. Now, I've had this wrench since I don't know when, and it's a standard 5/16 drive for standard Les Paul acorns. You'll notice that it's ground around the bottom and towards the rear. Reason is, sometimes you get an instrument in that has encroachment, in the route that lets you access the acorn. And I found that, you know what, I can't get that wrench on it. Why can't I get the wrench on it? Well, it's because there wasn't enough clearance to get the wrench on it. So I was able to get it to the point where I could work with it. And it's been my best friend for Les Pauls and Gibson products ever since. Anyway, that's that. That was my second point. Now, on to the process of prepping the fretboard. This is just the way I prefer to do this. Now, to be fair, I'm going to place my block around the 3rd fret. That way, any pressure is distributed through here and non-effectual at the end. Okay, gravity does have a play in here, but again, the amount of pressure I use and all these wonderful things. Anyway, yay. More yay. As far as refrets go, pardon me while I talk here, really, this is a cakewalk. It's still this. It's the same amount of work, relatively speaking, but because the structure is new, I don't have to deal with those nasty effects of time and distortion. I'm not going to say that's an absolute because there's always exceptions. Wow, I got to clean the junk out of my block here. Okay, now I'll give you a little insight into what I'm experiencing here. So I leveled out the fretboard and I use light and feel and feedback to tell me where I've hit, where I've not hit. And I'm very, very conservative when it comes to this sort of thing. Unless there's distortions that I have to deal with, then that's a different story. But I'm also feeling the resistance. I believe that using a shorter block gives me a better initial feedback when I'm going over the surface. Imagine this, okay, if this was a long thing, I would not be able to tell, and I've done it, don't get me wrong, I've done it, but it's harder to tell where there might be a problem over a longer span, whereas this shorter block gives me immediate feedback where there might be something that's not quite right. I can localize it. Here's an interesting thing. There's actually a little bit of shine on this side here where the block has not been able to fully contact the board. And that is more due to the scrape from the binding than anything else. It's not distortion. This instrument's not really old enough to have any distortion up in this area yet. So I would attribute that, and I can actually see the chatter from the scraping. It's pretty cool. Anyway, so that's that. Granted, this is a very specific instrument, but what I'm trying to look at here is what's left of the nib on the side. As I dress the board, the nib is irrelevant. I'm feeling out the board itself. The nibs are going to go away either way. Even I went at them like right from the get-go because I wanted to knock them down real quick. But I'm going more for the nature of the board, and I'm looking at the amount of material that's come off around the entire board. A little bit more got to come off here. That's good. I'm not trying to remove every little bit of evidence from the nibs being there because the new frets are gonna cover that. No problem. No problem at all. They'll be invisible. whatever's left over there. Okay, so did we introduce any ugly? Let's do it this way. Nope, I think we're looking good. This sort of activity, you really got to watch for the edges, because you can attenuate the edges a bit too much and just destroy the radius. As another observation, I have my score lines here, and they are also an indicator of how much material has been taken off. If I start to see the score lines disappear, I know I'm, and see, I got score lines here, I don't have score lines there. I know it's uneven. Simple as that. So they're like wear indicators. Okay, so where are we at here? Here's another point of observation. If you're using a radius sanding block, the moment it goes off axis, you're dinked. You're introducing distortion. It has to be completely, totally straight the entire time. If you wobble it a little bit, you have one curve competing with the second curve, and then you're buggered. Simple as that. So you're going to have a flatter radius. My last kick at this can is going to be a light sanding throughout. Good. And the last final check. Good, good, good. Okay, we're good. Now, at this point, I still haven't dealt with the grooves yet. That's coming. But I'm going to go over the surface with 220 and 600. Where's my 220? There we go. 220 and 600. Okay, so that will get the surface all prepped, and then we'll look at cleaning up everything to get to the point where we can start refretting. We have our board sanded down to 600 grit, and I want to point out one little thing that you got to be aware of. Because bound fretboards like this, Gibson products, are scraped in between the frets, that's what creates the nibs. You got to be really careful that you don't mistake voids on the edges for something else. You have to maintain that levelness of the board, the consistency of the board being straight and free from deformation. Like there's a really interesting few spots here where whoever was scraping it got a little aggressive, and I was looking at that and I was going, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. Okay, same thing that we had previously on this side. So anyway, at this point we are getting ready. We're that one step closer to plowing some new frets in, but we gotta clean out the slots. So forgive me for a second while I turn on my handy dandy filter queen and suck it up. We still have to dislodge any debris that would have wound up stuck in the slots. In terms of refretting and the process, etc., I want to give a shout out to Tanya Shpachuk out of Ukraine. She's a young lady that has been posting some incredibly good videos, like really cool shorts and long form videos on refretting and stuff. And she's very, very good. Restorative processes and things like that. We all have our approaches to doing this sort of thing. I wish her the best of luck, and to the people in the Ukraine in general. Okay, I'll leave a link for her stuff in the description too. She's well worth checking out. She does some brilliant work. The next step, now that we know the slots are clean, fretboard is clean, it's in great condition. I got, like, I see one tiny teeny little chip right there. Out of all those frets, I call that a win. And I'm not even gonna, it's gonna be covered up. I mean, come on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one of the original frets. Keep in mind there's like no wear on this material at all, except from whenever it was installed and then, leveled. It might lose a couple thou off the top. I'll take a moment and measure the difference between these two wires. The tang depth is, well, it's a little deeper on the double high, double wide sort of thing, or extra brute force, let's get her done fret wire here. Super jumbo, whatever. And we'll look at what the difference is in the dimensions, okay? And I'll document that in the next section. This is the original first fret, and this is a sample of what's going in there, or the replacement, if you would. And if we zoom in on that just for a sec, there's a bit of a difference, wouldn't you think? Yep. So what is the difference? Well, the original fret wire was 91 thou width, 40 thou height, and roughly 38 thou in tang. That is including the beads. Now the actual tang itself, the T part without the beads, that's important as well, because that has to fit the slot. If that tang is too wide, you're going to wind up putting wedges into the board, and it's going to turn into a nasty overbent thing that you'll never be able to straighten out. And if it's too thin, you're going to have sloppy issues. We don't want that. Okay, so all things considered, our replacement wire, let me get that situated. Okay, our replacement wire is 110 thou, or 0.110 wide. It's a pretty significant footprint. It's only 10 thou different, but is it 10? Hang on a second. No, 20. Actually, my math is wrong. 20 thou difference. So that's roughly the thickness of your average, say, a G string, a heavy gauge G string, if you can visualize it like that. So that's the difference in width. And the height is 55, which would be the equivalent of maybe a second string on an acoustic. So when you think of strings like that, like you can visualize the thicknesses of them, it's not a whole lot in terms of, well, the strings are pretty thin, but when we see it in terms of fret, it's really something different. So 55 in terms of height is significant. So these are going to be monstrous. And the tang width, come on out, is very compatible with the original. It's a little bit, I don't know if you can see this properly, but it's a little bit deeper because it is a different wire with getting it down into the slot. I'll make a couple of measurements before I commit to this, just to make sure I don't have to, because I can always grind the the bottom down a little bit and make sure that it's going to have clearance. I mean, really, at the end of the day, making sure these frets don't bottom out, that's going to be key. So I will go through the slots and make sure that there is enough clearance. I wasn't 100% confident that these two fret wires would get along in terms of tang, because the heavier wire is a little deeper than the original. And I measured some stuff out, and it turns out the original tang is about 60 thou deep total, and the replacement tang is going to be 70 thou total. So rather than just have at it and hope for the best, I made some measurements, and I'll show you a little trick that I use to make sure that I'm going to have enough purchase in the slot. And I'll go like this. I'll use the very corner right there, and then I'll do the same on the other side. Try to get that as pointy as I can. The pencil's quite sharp, so it should be okay. So now we have a couple of registration points, you might say. Just a general old business card, something that is substantial enough to take the, you know, the score or the markings. And then I take my original fret wire and I go, does that fit? Oh, by golly, looks like it fits. That's just dandy. And of course it's going to be more or less the same on both corners, so I'll forego that. But I wasn't quite happy with the way things were working out with this longer tang, because it's got a good chance of bottoming out. So what I did was, because of the measurements and the diligence in making sure everything is going to fit, I took my fret wire, the replacement fret wire, and I milled it down. This is just a sacrificial chunk, you might say. And I took about a minute, just literally just put it on a belt sander and eyeballed it. The consistency along the fret wire worked out really quite well. You know, that's going to work just dandy. But of course, I'm going to start with a tester, and I cut off a hunk of wire that was processed and trimmed it because it's a hidden tang because of the binding, and popped that in there. For one, it went in like a breeze. It went in really, really nice, really smooth. There's no compromise to the bite or anything like that, because the nibs, the teeth that is, they're all there. So they have not been touched in any way. In fact, they're a little bit deeper compared to the original wire. They're actually placed a little bit deeper. Not sure of the spacing, I didn't measure that, but yeah, different spaces and stuff like that. Which leads me, just as an aside, you got to watch that kind of stuff, because when the teeth or the nibs have, or not the nibs, but the beads, when they're spaced differently and stuff like that, you go start to hammer something in, it can start like here and then walk. It can literally, you know, shift a little bit. So you really got to keep an eye on how you manage your frets when you're putting them in. Now, okay, back to the actual process at hand, which is, how do we go about actually getting the wire to fit each individual slot? Well, the way I do it, I have one here on my handy dandy board. Okay. Keeps things organized, because it's all processes. It's repetitive processes, and you want to control them. So I cut the fret wire just with these. Let me see here. Okay, I got my fret nippers. Okay, they'll chop off the end of the tang there. Okay, pretty slick. Okay. And while I got you, okay, so maybe you can get a look at that. So this is awkward for me, but bear with me. So I'll pop that in there and knock off an appropriate amount. And double check it to make sure that there is enough reveal at each side, because this radius on the fret wire going in is tighter than the fretboard itself. Because what's going to happen is this fret wire is going to lay down. The ends are going to push in. They're going to scoop into to each side, which gives the beads will bite going in on an angle, and it'll hold the ends a little bit better. So you cut it to length and then use the nipper to trim the end. Okay. And then I have to, because the nipper leaves a little bit of a flat, and then I just take a file and just file it flush. I have a little vise off to the side that I pop them in to hold them securely, and then it takes like literally 2 seconds to clean up the remnants. Okay, some of these details make all the difference in the world in terms of a successful job. Here's my next piece of wire here, or my piece of wire I'm working with. I've got more than I need, but I always like to be conservative in case I run into a problem. So this is why I start at the last fret, the widest fret, and then work my way towards the first fret, so the pieces get consecutively narrow or shorter, you might say, and I can coordinate between the wire, be conservative, and I'm also taking care to keep the ends of the frets fairly tight to the board here, because trying to knock these nibs or these take the ends of the frets down after the fact on a refret on a very nice instrument is something you've got to do very, very, very carefully. We'll get to that when the time comes. Anyway, back to the process at hand. I've already done this one, so I'm going to do number 20. And I'm just going to look, I'm looking directly over top of it. I'm going to give it maybe 1 millimeter extra on either side. So, something less than a 1/16, you might say. Okay. And then I'll chop that. So now I have my blank. See, that's still, see how these edges, I hope you can see this, they're like right tight to the binding. If I try to pop that in, even after the ends are finished up, it's gonna, that binding's just gonna have a bad day, and I'll have a worse day. So I'm gonna take the crushed end here. Yeah, it's all in the details, eh? I'm trying to get this on camera here for you, and knock a little bit off of there, because I know I got some to spare. And then I will appease that fret end a little bit more. And that's not bad. I might file that back just a hair, just to keep it, I mean, a couple thou, really. Just to make sure that it doesn't, encroach on the binding at all. I don't want to get the last thing you want to see is the binding start to bulge after you pop a fret. I mean, come on, that's no fun. So anyway, there's the ends nipped. Now, as far as how I'm cutting these, the actual wire, I have a couple pairs of side cutters here, which they're really hard tempered steel, good quality stuff, really good quality stuff, and I've been using them for years. And I have a couple pairs, as I said, and they cut differently. One's larger than the other, so it depends on the job. Of course, they have to be reconditioned, all that kind of stuff. But as we go along, here's the other thing I'll mention. Now, if by happenstance I nip this, say one of the ends a bit too shy, and I'm not comfortable with that, well, that fret will go to the next smaller fret, or perhaps the one after that, or towards the headstock, so that I always have I don't waste any material. So does that make sense? You know, so you cut it short, no big deal. If you start with the longest frets and you cut something a little short, you can use it further down the road. So it's all about the logic and the processes. Okay, hope you got that. So now the next step is I will file these flats. Okay, I'm gonna be right back. All right, so that didn't take too long. And there we have, let's get a light on that. There we have our finished leveled end of the fret. And to double check that everything is going to go as should be, I'm just gonna make sure I don't have too much material hanging over the edge or too tight to the edge. I mean, you got nowhere to go if that's too shy. If the end of the fret is too shy against the edge of the fretboard, I mean, you got to take it out and start over. Or either that, or you plow the fretboard back until it matches, which is not a fun time. Okay. Anyway, so that was number 20, and back to this is number 21. Okay. And just as an example, I am going to pop that in there. Now, depending on the instrument, I may have support under the neck, or I might not. It depends on the build and a number of factors here. So I think things are going to probably get a little jiggly here for a second while I make a couple of small adjustments here. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I see this is going to be interesting because I'm going to support this with my hand while I just tack those ends in. You see that? That was pretty straightforward. And I'm supporting the body with my hand, and I'm just going to chase that with my handy dandy Stumac hammer, which does come in handy, you know. I'll say that. Make sure I'm not rattling anything off the table. The brass blow is that's pretty nice. It's really kind to the fret material. That's not bad. It's a little light. I'm probably going to wind up gluing the ends down anyway. But I'll see if I can get them to stick. Not bad. I'll go over them later on. But anyway, that's how that works. Now, as an additional tip, let's do it this way. I'm going to do one more and see if I can't provide that little extra bit of information. Okay, so that's tacked in. Now let's say that this was going in, and I noticed that it was shifted over to one side. Is this one actually, yeah, a little bit. What I'll do is I'll just give that a couple of little love taps, and it's just dandy. Just like the old school Fender frets, the process they used for many years. They would slide the frets in from the side using a special caul. Let's straighten that out again. There we go. Okay. Yes, the frets will move side to side, but again, you got to be real careful. This is a very specific job because this is a nice instrument. It's got binding, and I don't want to blow out any of the binding or make, you know, cause any damage of any kind. So to be conscious of all the processes goes a long way. Not too bad. Like I said, I'm gonna wind up gluing those fret ends down just for the sake of solidity. As another aside, if you try this with a factory Les Paul, tapping the frets like that, don't be surprised if you hear exactly what you just did right there. It's just the nature of it. It doesn't compromise the tone or anything like that to any great degree. If you feel like you're compelled to glue the fret ends down just for solidarity, so be it. Anyway, I digress again. So at this point, the rest of it is repetition, cut, trim, etc., 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 and I will do each fret in turn, just the cutting and trimming, and then I will go and hammer them in one at a time, and then the next step will be making them look nice, which means chamfering the ends and cleaning all that stuff up. That took maybe 14, 15 minutes. Okay, to get those all hammer slammered, bammered in there. Took the rocker and checked everything. I will take my straight edge. Now we need a little bit of straightening. So that really doesn't affect what was done, but it does affect what's coming. Because if I'm going to level the board, I want a level board. All good, all very good. Now that was a good torque on the adjuster. Yeah, see, that came back up. It's not seating. We'll get it. Yep, good to go. Good. Okay, frets are in, relief is readjusted, everything checks out really good. I'm going to, now you may have seen another video I did about using multiple straight edges. Okay. So what this does, what this particular ruler does, is it tells me where any wavy gravies are. There's one there. Okay, right around the 4th fret. Better. Good. Good. Okay. So a little bit of a high spot in the overall geometry of the neck. That's probably a little pressure from the truss rod bound up. I'm going to let this sit for a day or a few hours at least. Let the pressure kind of work its way through, and I got to carry on anyway. Next job is going to be taking care of these bad boys, and it's going to be, yeah, it's always fun, always fun. Dealing with this stuff up here is, you got to be super careful. In terms of fret mass, these are big boys. They're going to be very similar to working with stainless steel in terms of the amount of work to get them where they need to be. It's surface area and stuff like that, resistance in the files and stuff like that. It'll be fine. Anyway, we'll get back to this momentarily. Before we tackle the fret ends, taking them off that is, I still have to glue the ends down, which is actually the next step. I got a little tip for you. I may have mentioned this before, but I'll say it like this. This is the original K Razy glue, CA glue you might call it, as it's known more commonly. This is the original formula, which is really thin, nice in the best way. If it's not the original formula, you're going to have a different viscosity. Now, you can use that for different purposes, filling or the voids and stuff, or gluing up different materials. But for our purposes here, I want something that wicks into underneath the fret real fast and dries real fast. And this is the stuff that does it. The other thing is, I buy these original tubes and go through them. It's not a crazy expense, and it also gets around the problem of, here's the thing, you want to do the job, you buy these big tubes of or containers of glue. If you're not doing this kind of work like all day every day, which I don't, I do all sorts of other jobs, that stuff is going to set up on you, it's going to thicken up on you, and you're going to waste your money. Buy what you need for a reasonable amount of time. Simple as that. Anyway, end of rant. I'll carry on. So this is my preferred method of gluing the frets down. Shot, wipe, push, and carry on. And then I'll come back with a razor and scrape out the excess. And that's done. Now, compared, I know these are not bad actually, but that's solid all the way around. There's little, no, that's good. There, that one's got a little dead to it. Listen to the difference. Now, just for giggles, that's number 11. I'm going to hit that real fast. Hang on to it for about 5 seconds. 3, 4, 5. Finger doesn't stick or nothing. That's the beauty of this, okay? Just like that. It's really that easy. Just have to have a good technique. While I'm doing this, I will explain or share a little something that the next generation may not be aware of, which is CA glue in the guitar, in this, rather common, I would say, area of guitar repair and refretting and stuff like that, and other general things. There we go. Okay. CA glue has not been around for this kind of public use for that long. And I remember back in the 90s starting to use, and I went, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. This is a game changer because you could instantly repair minor separations, finish separations. You have to be judicious in, you know, what you were using it for and on. But for this kind of application, holy cow. Just changed everything, made everything so much more efficient. And now we see it all the time. And that, as they say, is that. Now the last little step here will be scraping off the residue. Before I continue here, I might let's move the camera around a little bit. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Really light scrape because there's really not a whole lot of glue there. Next up will be, again, making sure the fret ends are dressed down properly. Okay, and we'll see you in just a bit. On to the business of taking down these nibs. You got to be careful because you can do some nasty damage that you really do want to avoid. Now, of course, I do have my own processes for this, as you know, most people would. But again, it comes down to knowing your tools, being comfortable with what you're used to using. And in this case, this is just a double cut file that here, I'll put that up there just for shoe. A double cut file that has a certain kind of aggressive bite that I like. Feels right to me. Because of where we are and the propensity to you know, get through some of this, even though it's masked and protected, I still like to use this aluminum piece of ruler. These ends have to come down nice and neat to meet the binding, but we want to not destroy the binding or any of those cosmetics. We might hit it here and there very, very, very lightly to blend things in. We want to get these fret ends down to the point with a nice chamfer. Anyway, so I'm getting close to the edge here, just as a matter of control. I'm going to not use this. When it comes to the other side, I'll have that I'm going to tape that right tight to the body, and it'll be a different affair, because this is like we're working with a very, very little room here. Yeah, we're getting there. So as I get closer to where I want to be, I'm going to be going through different kinds of files. It's one of those very weird tactile things where you spend time with the tools and you get a sense of what's working and what you're comfortable with. Very good, very good. So I'm using my thumb as a fence on top of the fretboard to help give me a sense of better control, you might say. I'm taking off as much as I can with this big bad boy. This is an aggressive file, by the way. But I got to be really, really careful that I don't get into the binding. I think I'm almost at that point where I'm going to transition to another file. Now you may be saying, what about using one of those blocks? You mean something like this? Yes, I have these blocks, but I have my own way of chamfering frets that just works for me. Do it all by eye and feel, of course. If the chamfer is acute, closer to a right angle, the benefit of that is you get more surface area. The drawback is you're going to feel the bumps, and it's going to feel clunky and like railroad ties under your, like when you're driving a car. It's crazy. Conversely, when you roll back those edges, you're gonna, you know, and some guitars won't let you get away with encroaching into the fret too much. So it's a fine balance for the instrument you're working on. I have my own technique that I go by, which is, again, by eye. I keep sighting down the edge of the fretboard to make sure that the line is straight. At some point, you can actually feel, just through the type of resistance coming back through your tools, you'll feel when you're starting to really get tight to the binding, to the point where enough is enough. Beauty. Okay. So that is almost a dead straight line, and this is where I'll break out this big bad boy to literally even things out. And I'm really watching this carefully here. So it's time consuming. It is what it is. I got a little housekeeping to tend to, but all things being equal, it's all good. Now I'm going to do the other side, and then we'll come back and look at the next process. Not that they're chamfered, awesome, but they need a little attention to feel more friendly, player friendly. Okay, so I'm going to use my handy dandy auger file, I should say. Yeah, there are any number of purpose specific files you can use. You know, I've got, you know, a selection of this and that, but I like using this thing. It does a lot of different jobs, and it does them very, very well. And it's got a bite surface, it's got a flat surface, or just a non-bite surface, you might say. So it does what it does very, very well. And I've been using it for years. So again, it's one of those things where you get comfortable using a tool, and you understand and create an affinity for the feedback. So what I need to do is just take these hard, sharp edges off the frets. Yes, it's pretty much that simple. Here's an interesting thing. Maybe this might make sense to somebody, and I hope you get something out of it. I'm continually trying to train myself to get used to the tools with both hands in certain applications, and this is one of them. And the only thing you can do is try. Depending on the profile you want to achieve here, you can get pretty aggressive with your detailing, and I'm not going for the super dome, the hemispheric thing that seems to be here and there and everywhere. I'm looking for something that is comfortable, has real estate behind it, and is player friendly. All good. Okay, well, see, that's one side. Onto the other side. All right, we're in the home stretch. I just used the notch straight edge to make sure that things are nice and level, which they are. We need to make sure that each fret is level one to the next, as it should be. One of my favorite tools, this idiot of a file that I've been using for almost 25 years or so. Again, it's one of those things where you get used to your tools. Doesn't have a block on top of it. I just know what it feels like and how it works. And the other thing I'll say is I'm not using a long straight edge or a beam. It's one of these things where the processes I use are from a long time ago, producing exactly the same results, consistent, straight, playable necks with, you know, reasonably good fretwork and stuff, and with very modest tools. You don't need necessarily the latest and greatest. You just need to know how to read things, have a good process. Again, one of those silly things. So I'll try to explain what's going on here. Okay, at this point, what I did was the initial planing. Keep in mind that up to this point, the neck has been consistently checked for straightness. I took a lot of care to make sure that the frets were in consistently as well, making sure that everything is as close to perfection as you can get with the raw materials will give you dividends, will pay dividends, let's say. Now, there are a few different ways I like to go about doing this. My preferred way is to use light. What I'm looking for is, have I hit every fret? Is there anything that's sitting excessively proud or has not been touched by the file? Anyway, as far as I can tell, every fret, oh, not that one, that's got very little contact. And it's really that simple. I mean, out of all of this, okay, I'm going to hit it again. That's a beautiful thing. There are advantages to these jumbo frets because they have a pretty, like, severe dome on them, which is a lot of surface area, and they'll give you, I mean, let me rephrase. With fine frets, couple strokes, and you're putting the wavy gravies in there if you're not careful. Big frets, lots of surface area, and you can be pretty confident in that you got meat on the table, so to speak. Okay, now here's something that you may or may not have heard of or seen before. Okay, now I was talking for a few seconds, and I cleaned the fretboard with of course the brush in my hand intentionally, and I'm going to take a little drink because I'm parched. Anyway, what I just did was totally intentional. The relatively weak oil from my palm is now on the frets, and any friction from the file, the leveling process, which created heat, has now dissipated. And so what I'm going to try to figure out is, what is this file telling me now that the surface is slightly lubed and level as it can be in its current state. In other words, I want this file to skate. If it skates without resistance anywhere, I know I've done a good job. That is done. I'll tell you that. That thing is flat and true. I'll tell you, it's really that simple. It's done. That's level. And the next step is crowning. I will get my crowning file out and my file card, which is, this thing has to be 40 years old, or maybe more than that, I would say. Felton, sorry, made in Canada. Made in Canada, eh? I have 2 files. This is really old. This one is definitely from All Parts. The thing is, this has a pretty coarse bite. This one here is nicely, it works well, but it's actually a little bit worn, and it burnishes the frets really nicely at the same time. I've been using this for literally 30 years, 3 decades, and it works just peachy. This one here, if I can describe it, this takes majority of the material off. This smooths it out. Actually, I might just switch up to the burnishing file, because it'll leave a nicer finish. Oh yeah. Now I'm going to be moving the lights around a lot. Yeah. There's so little that came off the fret. That all we need is just touch the top of the fret. Anybody that wants to pay attention and has this far, I'm going to share a little inside tip with you. When you roll your frets, that is when you have the there's the machine you can get from Stumac or wherever, that you take a straight 2-foot length of fret wire and you roll it. You put it through the roller to put a curve on it, radius on it. If you do that more than once, or 2 or 3 times, and you can tweak the radius, tighten it up maybe a little bit, or just change it, you will actually harden the fret material. The original fret material will go up a step or so on the hardness scale, because it's being compressed and you're changing the molecular compression within the metal itself, which I like to do just because, yeah, let's put a little bit more life into the frets. Again, this is one of those I did not know that moments, unless you've done this job like many times. As you're crowning them, as you're milling them, frets heat up. If I spend a lot of time on a particular fret, I'll get it close to where I want it, and then I'll move to the next fret and let that fret cool down. For anybody who is, say, doing their first frets and stuff like that, these are the things you want to try to keep in mind or in your memory bank or as reference materials as you work through your processes, especially as you get into your next instrument and you gain that extra experience. Okay. Next step is polish. Thought I'd give you a real quick bird's eye of what we have so far. So the leveling and crowning has been done, and you might see the odd imperfection here and there, but they'll go away. Now we're into the last process of getting our Les Paul all dialed in. I'm just doing a quick scuff. And that is I'm not pushing, I'm not trying to clean or do anything other than just hit the surface. All right, because if you start to get really aggressive, this is 600 sandpaper, by the way. If you start to get really aggressive with this, you'll start making things look a little bit overdone. Blending the fret surface, because the actual side of the fret is polished, factory, you know, it's just from the extrusion process. It has a pretty good finish on it to begin with. And this sort of scuffing just takes that top finish, and we're just blending it into the rest of the instrument, or the rest of the fret. This is 1500 micro mesh, and I'm just gonna give the ends of the frets a hit. 3200. So at this point, I'm done with using a block. It's all by hand. Good. Okay. You're gonna hate me. Yes, that was a household cleaner. Terrible, terrible thing, terrible thing. How could you do that to a fine guitar? Well, I just did. That's too bad. Brass bristle brush. That's a beautiful thing. Okay. And where did I see you? There you were. Good. This is 6,000. Okay, beauty. Okay, that was 6,000. And we're gonna finish up with 12. Last step. Well, let's have a quick look. Not too shabby, just good old-fashioned processes. Owner wanted some big old fret wire in there. I said to the owner, I said, chances are we're going to have to place the nut, and we will have to replace the nut, which will be the next step. Well, here's our fabulous bone nut job, all complete. And it turned out just fine. Refretting a Gibson standard Les Paul 60s version with double high jumbos. Cheers.